Have you ever stopped to think why some people are able to attract prosperity while others live trapped in debt and instability? What if I told you there's a key that can transform not only your financial life, but also the way you see yourself in the world? Today I'm going to tell you the story of Michael, an ordinary man who always struggled to keep a stable job and lived surrounded by the fear of failure, until, amidst the chaos, he discovered something that would change everything: the power of the law of attraction. What seemed impossible began to take shape when Michael decided to change his mindset. From then on, unexpected opportunities arose, and his financial life underwent a surprising turnaround. But the most impressive thing wasn't just the money, it was the inner transformation that gave him a new vision for the future. And as you listen to this story, I ask you, have you ever imagined attracting stability, abundance, and confidence into your own life? If this idea resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment below. This will greatly help spread this content and keep this transformative energy reaching more people. Get ready, because Michael's journey will inspire you to believe that prosperity can be within your reach too. Michael was one of those faces that went unnoticed in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. He worked here and there, never for long, as if life insisted on pushing him back to square one. His neighbors saw him as a hard worker, but one who seemed to carry an invisible weight on his shoulders. Bills always piled up on the kitchen table, reminding him that money was either arriving too late or leaving too soon. Deep down, he wondered why it seemed so difficult to hold down a job for more than a few months. Sometimes he felt like there was something wrong with him, as if he couldn't find his place in the world. Mornings began with uncertainty, and nights ended with the anguish of what now? Michael felt trapped in a cycle he couldn't break. Still, there was something in his gaze that caught my attention, a stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. Behind the facade of hardship lay a deep desire to transform his own life. He didn't know exactly how or when this would happen, but he silently dreamed of the day when he would no longer have to worry about overdue bills. In those lonely moments, sitting on the edge of his bed, Michael wondered what it would be like to live without fear of tomorrow. He imagined a lighter life, where work was more than a suffocating obligation. A life where he could feel dignified, able to support himself without the burden of instability. And it was precisely this contrast between the turbulent present and the dreamed future that planted an invisible seed within him. A seed that, without him realizing it, would begin to germinate the moment it was watered by the strength of his mind and the discovery of a previously unknown power. Michael's trajectory always seemed to follow the same script. He'd start a new job full of hope, but before long something would happen, and everything would fall apart. Sometimes it was an unexpected layoff, other times it was just difficulty adapting to the new environment. The result in the end was always the same: dismissal and a painful return to square one. With each loss, a pile of unpaid bills grew on the living room table. The light flickered as a cruel reminder of the accumulated debts, and the phone rang non-stop with bills. Michael tried to remain calm, but the feeling of failure became almost unbearable. With each slam of the door, it seemed the world was demanding an answer he couldn't give. He wondered why life insisted on repeating that cycle. It was as if an invisible shadow haunted him, always keeping him one step behind the stability he so desperately desired. This feeling of being trapped in a maze with no way out sapped his strength. However, even though he was tired, there was something inside him that still refused to accept that fate. Nights were the hardest times. Lying in the dark, Michael stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of uncertainty crushing his mind. Sleep was slow to come, and when it did, it was light and restless. The fear of the next day was always there, lingering like an unwanted visitor that never left. And it was in this scenario of repeated defeats and relentless pressure that a small spark began to emerge. Still timid, almost imperceptible, but capable of changing everything. After all, even in the midst of the greatest storms, sometimes a chance arises to discover something that can completely change the game. In Michael's mind, the idea of prosperity sounded almost like a distant fantasy. He grew up hearing that money was hard to come by, that stability was a privilege for the few, and that those born to suffer will never succeed. These phrases echoed within him like absolute truths, shaping his worldview. Every time an opportunity arose, doubt was the first to appear. Am I capable? Will I be able to handle it? This constant questioning made him give up before he even tried. It was as if he were carrying an invisible wall, built by years of fear and disbelief in his own potential. Michael believed that luck was never on his side. He saw himself as destined to live only on small victories, followed by great failures. The success of others seemed natural to him, but to himself it felt like a door that was always locked. This belief prevented him from seeing the opportunities that passed before his eyes. It was painful to feel that no matter how hard he tried, the end result was already written: failure. He even thought of stability as a lottery prize, something simply not destined for him. This self-perception kept him in a vicious cycle of interrupted attempts and abandoned dreams. But somewhere inside him, there was still a soft, almost suffocated voice that insisted that life could be different. A voice that would gradually grow stronger as he discovered a new path, one capable of transforming his way of thinking, and in doing so, rewriting his story. Michael carried a heavy mix of emotions in his chest that seemed to never cease. Frustration was the most constant, like an unwanted companion that followed him every step of the way. He looked in the mirror and wondered why he couldn't succeed, why it seemed so difficult to achieve the basics that so many others had. Anxiety followed close behind, taking over his mornings and nights. His heart raced when he thought about overdue bills, and the mere sound of the mailman approaching took his breath away. It was as if each new day brought proof that he wasn't in control of his own life. Low self-esteem grew silently, eroding his confidence. Michael no longer believed he was capable of achieving anything great, and even small achievements seemed like happenstance. He often compared himself to others, thinking everyone was making progress while he remained stuck. In his loneliest moments, he would feel invisible to the world, as if his voice carried no weight, and his attempts were never enough. The loneliness hurt, and with it came the feeling of always being behind life. But as the deepest darkness is also the one that precedes the dawn, it was in this state of fragility that an unexpected spark would begin to emerge. Something that would challenge all the certainties he held about himself and what was possible. One night, after another exhausting day, Michael was aimlessly browsing the internet, searching for any distraction. It was then that he came across a video about something called the law of attraction. At first, he turned up his nose, thinking it was just another empty promise. But as he listened, something inside him began to spark curiosity. The idea that one's thoughts could shape reality seemed both strange and fascinating. Michael wasn't accustomed to believing in inner power, but those words stirred something dormant in his heart. It was as if someone had opened a window in a dark room, letting in a beam of light. He found himself wondering, what if this is true? What if I really have the ability to change my life just by changing my mindset? These questions echoed in his mind, leaving him uneasy but also hopeful. For the first time in a long time, he felt a whiff of possibility. In the days that followed, he couldn't get the idea out of his head. Every time he remembered it, a mixture of skepticism and enthusiasm washed over him. Even without knowing exactly how to apply it, Michael sensed that it held a key to unlock doors he believed were sealed, and it was in this wave of curiosity that he took the first steps toward a journey that would change everything. Without realizing it, he was beginning the process of transformation that would lead him to discover strengths he never imagined he possessed. Driven by curiosity, Michael began researching everything he could about the law of attraction. He found old books about the power of the mind and spent entire nights devouring each page. It was as if he were rediscovering a world that had always been there, but which he had never paid attention to. The videos also became part of his routine. With each story of overcoming adversity he watched, he felt a spark ignite within him. Ordinary people, just like himself, spoke of extraordinary changes they had achieved simply by changing their mindset. This gave him hope that perhaps he wasn't doomed to failure. Michael jotted down sentences, highlighted passages, and mentally repeated affirmations that seemed to resonate with him. He didn't have all the answers yet, but something was already different. For the first time in a long time, he felt motivated to try something new. There was a freshness in the air, a sense that the impossible could be questioned. With each reading, it was as if a piece of the puzzle of his life was falling into place. What had previously seemed like chaos now began to have a common thread, an unexpected logic. Michael found himself smiling to himself, imagining that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the maze he found himself in. And so, with books by his bed and videos playing late into the night, he prepared himself without realizing it to take an even bolder step, to test in practice everything he had been learning, even without being sure of what would happen. Despite his initial enthusiasm, Michael soon encountered his first obstacle: doubt. The question kept echoing in his mind: is this real, or just a pretty illusion to deceive those who need hope? This internal conflict left him torn between believing and giving up. He remembered the times he'd tried to change his life, only to have everything fall apart again. So disbelief rose like a loud voice, mocking every new practice he tried. "Do you really think just positive thinking will pay your bills?" he asked himself, almost laughing at his own naivete. But at the same time, there was something different. With each doubt, a small spark of desire to continue also emerged. It was as if a part of him wanted to prove that, this time, things could be different. This resistance wasn't just an obstacle, but also an invitation to truly test his faith. Michael found himself at an impasse, between the old habit of sabotaging himself and the new possibility of believing in something greater. His days became a kind of battlefield where negative and positive thoughts dueled for his attention. And in this silent conflict, he began to realize that perhaps true transformation wasn't just in what he read or watched, but in what he chose to believe every day. Amidst his doubts, Michael decided to try something simple he had learned: gratitude. At first, it felt strange to be thankful for such small things, like the plate of food on the table or the roof that sheltered him from the rain. But little by little, this practice began to affect him in unexpected ways. Every morning before leaving the house, he took a deep breath and mentally listed 3 things to be grateful for. It didn't matter if they were big or small, the important thing was to feel them. And curiously, the more he was grateful, the lighter his heart felt, as if some of the weight he carried was melting away. At night, he repeated the same ritual, but this time writing in a small notebook. Those simple scribbles became silent reminders that despite his troubles, he still had reasons to smile. And this realization awakened a new feeling in him. Maybe he wasn't so lost after all. Gratitude became a kind of refuge, a point of balance amidst the chaos. He realized that the more he appreciated what he already had, the less he felt suffocated by debt and instability. It was like changing the lens of life. What once seemed gray now had hidden colors. And it was in this seemingly simple exercise that Michael began to discover that the power to change was not just outside, but within him. And this insight would pave the way for the next, even more transformative discovery. After cultivating gratitude, Michael felt ready to take it a step further. It was then that he discovered the practice of visualization. The idea of imagining himself living the life he desired seemed at first like child's play. But when he closed his eyes, something magical began to happen. He could see himself in an office, sitting at a tidy desk, with a name tag bearing his name. At first his mind resisted, reminding him of the layoffs and failures. But the more he persisted, the clearer the scene became. He could even feel the touch of the pen in his hands, hear the sound of his colleagues chatting nearby, and even imagine the smell of the coffee he would drink every morning before starting work. It was as if he were already living that reality. These images brought him a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. For a few minutes, he let go of the weight of his debt and connected with the version of himself he wanted to be. And the more he practiced, the more he believed that future wasn't impossible. Over time, visualization went from being just an exercise to a habit. Michael discovered that whenever he closed his eyes, he could access a world where stability and prosperity were already within his reach. This imaginary world became increasingly real within him, and as his mind adjusted to this new scenario, something imperceptible began to change inside him. The belief that he could not only dream, but also achieve. Over time, Michael began to notice something curious. The days he woke up feeling more positive seemed to flow differently. When he focused on the images of prosperity he visualized, small opportunities, unexpected encounters, or even solutions to problems that previously seemed hopeless would arise. It was as if the world responded to the way he thought. He realized that for years he had fed his mind with negative phrases, resulting in a life full of blockages. Now, by replacing those beliefs with thoughts of confidence, his reality began to align with this new energy. It was a simple yet powerful discovery. His life was a direct reflection of what he carried within. Michael began to police himself more. Whenever a defeatist thought arose, he took a deep breath and replaced it with a positive affirmation. At first it felt forced, but with practice, this new habit became second nature. Gradually, the old self-sabotaging pattern faded. This shift in mindset also affected the way he dealt with problems. Instead of complaining or despairing, he began to see each difficulty as a test to strengthen his new worldview. This renewed attitude gave him the courage to face situations that previously paralyzed him. And as this internal transformation took hold, Michael felt it was only the beginning. It was as if life was paving the way for something bigger, something that would put into practice everything he'd been cultivating in his mind. Michael realized that to sustain his new mindset, he would need discipline. So he created small daily rituals that gradually became part of his routine. Early in the morning, in front of the mirror, he would repeat affirmative phrases like, "I am worthy of prosperity, and financial stability is already part of my life." At first, it seemed strange, but gradually these words took root. He also began writing down his goals in a simple notebook. They weren't just wishful thinking, but clear objectives: securing a stable job, paying off debt, building a financial reserve. He wrote with conviction, as if each word were a direct order to the universe. This practice gave him direction and clarity about where he was headed. At night, he maintained a gratitude habit. Before going to sleep, he would list 5 good things that had happened during the day, no matter how small. This exercise allowed his mind to rest peacefully, even when problems still lingered. He began to realize that there was always something positive, even in difficult situations. These new habits served as invisible pillars, supporting his transformation. He was no longer a man adrift, but someone who consciously shaped his thoughts and attitude. It was as if he were building, brick by brick, the solid foundation of the life he had always wanted. And while he was strengthening his inner discipline, Michael still didn't imagine that this silent change would soon be reflected in concrete and surprising events in his life. It was then that small signs began to appear. Michael noticed that when he maintained his gratitude and visualization routine, unlikely situations would occur. A former colleague approached him offering a temporary job, a neighbor recommended him for an interview, and even casual conversations opened doors he never would have imagined before. These opportunities weren't immediately grand, but they had a special flavor. They seemed to confirm that the universe was responding to his new thoughts. Every detail, no matter how small, fueled his confidence that he was on the right path. It was like seeing sprouts emerge after a long period of watering dry soil. Michael realized it was no longer just a coincidence. There was a synchronicity to the events, as if the pieces were finally falling into place. He felt something bigger was at work, guiding him step by step toward the life he had dreamed of. These small victories also strengthened his faith in the process. Before, he would have ignored or even sabotaged the opportunities that arose. Now, he was more attentive, receptive, and ready to seize each opportunity as if it were unique. This completely changed his attitude toward life, and in this wave of discoveries, an even greater challenge would arise, a real test that would test everything he had been cultivating in his mind and heart. It was during this period of small victories that a different opportunity arose, one greater than all the others before. A friend told him about an opening at a respected company, in exactly the field Michael had always wanted to work in. His heart raced with excitement, but along with it came an old acquaintance, fear. The memory of past layoffs came back like a ghost. He thought, what if I'm not good enough? What if everything ends up the same as before? These questions echoed in his mind, making him doubt his own abilities. The fear of failure almost convinced him not to try. Michael even tried to come up with excuses to refuse the interview, telling himself he wasn't ready yet. But deep down, he knew this was the chance he'd been waiting for. It was as if the universe had placed this opportunity in his hands precisely to test him. Between anxiety and hope, he realized this moment was a turning point. Either he faced the challenge and proved himself capable, or he would remain trapped in the cycle of insecurity that had always plagued him. The dilemma was intense, as if he were facing an invisible crossroads, and it was in this whirlwind of emotions that Michael remembered everything he had learned from the law of attraction. Perhaps it was time to truly use every practice he had been cultivating to face the greatest test of his journey so far. The day before the interview, Michael decided he wouldn't let fear get the better of him. He sat quietly, closed his eyes, and began to visualize the perfect scene, him walking into the room with a firm stance, smiling confidently, and answering the questions clearly. He even imagined the handshake at the end, firm and confident, as if he'd already earned the job. He repeated the exercise several times until he felt his heart slow. Every detail he created in his mind felt real, as if he had lived that moment before. The insecurity still whispered, but now its voice was quieter in the face of the confidence growing within him. In addition to visualization, Michael reinforced his affirmations. I am capable, I am worthy, I already have this job. These words, repeated with conviction, acted like anchors, keeping him steady amid the storm of nervousness that tried to overwhelm him. That night, instead of losing sleep over negative thoughts, he fell asleep with the feeling that something good was on its way. For the first time before a big opportunity, he lay down with peace in his heart. It was as if he had handed over to the universe the responsibility of aligning everything in his favor. And when he woke up the next morning, there was a different energy in the air. The day seemed to have a glow of its own, as if every second were an invitation to live exactly what he had been envisioning in his mind. When the big day arrived, Michael felt the usual butterflies in his stomach. His heart was pounding, and for a moment the old fear almost took over. But as he took a deep breath, he remembered the scene he had visualized so many times. That mental image brought back his confidence, as if he already knew exactly what to do. He entered the interview room with firm steps, his gaze serene. In the past, he would have stuttered, lost his words, or even given up halfway through. But now, guided by his new mindset, he found clarity in answering questions and conveyed confidence in every gesture. Little by little, he realized he wasn't just acting confident, he actually felt it. It was as if he'd activated a stronger version of himself, the one that had always existed but had been hidden beneath years of insecurity. And this version was ready to take over. Throughout the conversation, Michael kept his focus on what he wanted, not what he feared. Each answer carried not only his experience, but also the silent conviction that he deserved to be there. This attitude completely transformed the energy in the room, making it clear that he was not just another candidate. And as he left the room, he felt something different, For the first time, he wasn't judging himself for what he might have done wrong. Instead, he carried in his heart the certainty that he had done his best, and that, in itself, was a victory that changed everything. Days after the interview, Michael received the call that would change his life. On the other end, the recruiter's voice sounded calm, but to him, each word felt like thunder in the silence of the room. "Congratulations, Michael. You've been selected for the position." In that moment, time stood still. He was speechless for a few seconds, just absorbing the news. His heart raced, and a wave of joy coursed through him, as if breaking an invisible barrier. Unlike other times, he felt no fear of what would come next. What he felt now was confidence, an inner certainty that something inside him had truly changed. As he hung up the phone, Michael smiled like he hadn't in a long time. It wasn't just a job. It was the symbol of a new phase, concrete proof that his thoughts were, in fact, shaping his reality. This achievement was a reflection of his new mindset. In the following days, he enthusiastically began preparing for his new routine. He organized his clothes, adjusted his schedule, and even restructured his finances to adapt to his new salary. Everything seemed to fall into place naturally, as if guided by a higher power. And amidst this whirlwind of positive emotions, Michael realized something profound. This wasn't just a victory at work, but a sign that he had discovered a key capable of opening many other doors in the future. As the months passed, Michael realized that the real change wasn't just in his paycheck. The job brought stability, yes, but it was the transformation of his mindset that truly sustained this new phase. He no longer woke up dreading tomorrow. Instead, he started the day with purpose and clarity. With each challenge that arose at work, he remembered to apply what he had learned. Instead of complaining, he sought solutions. Instead of doubting himself, he trusted his abilities. This attitude set him apart from his colleagues and earned him respect and recognition. It was as if his energy was contagious. Deep down, Michael understood that stability didn't come from outside, but from within. His job was merely a reflection of the balance he had achieved in his mind. This realization gave him a sense of power, of control over his own life, something he had never experienced before. He also noticed that his old fears had lost their grip. What once seemed impossible now became just another step on his journey. This newfound confidence was like a silent engine, driving him to dream bigger and believe that new achievements were on the horizon. And it was in this state of constant growth that Michael began to realize another important detail. If his professional life was transforming, why not believe that his financial life could also flourish even more? With his new job and renewed mindset, Michael began to see clear implications for his financial life. His first step was to confront his old debts, the ones that had previously seemed insurmountable. This time, instead of running away from them, he made a simple plan, wrote down the amounts and began paying them off one by one. Each bill paid felt like a weight lifted from his shoulders. He also learned to better manage his incoming money. He created spreadsheets, divided his expenses, and for the first time began to have clarity about where his salary was actually going. This practice brought a sense of control that had previously seemed impossible, as if he had finally taken the wheel of his own financial life. And to his surprise, after months of discipline, he had something left over that he had never experienced before: money saved. A small amount, true, but it represented much more than numbers. It was a sign that he was building a solid future, a foundation that would protect him from storms. Michael felt proud every time he looked at his account and saw that positive balance. It wasn't just money, it was living proof of his transformation, the fruit of a mind that now believed in abundance. This achievement further renewed his faith in the law of attraction. And with a light heart and his finances in order, he began to dream of new horizons, discovering that prosperity could go far beyond what he had initially imagined. Over time, Michael discovered that true prosperity went far beyond the numbers in his bank account. Money brought relief, of course, but what truly transformed him was the sense of balance he now carried within. He no longer lived under the constant pressure of debt, nor under the crushing weight of fear. This new attitude was reflected in every area of his life. He smiled more, slept better, and even his relationships became more relaxed. Friends and family began to notice the difference in his speech and behavior, as if he had become a different person. In fact, he was a more confident and fulfilled version of himself. Michael finally understood that prosperity wasn't just about having money to spare, but about feeling at peace with himself. It was the certainty that he was on the right path, that he could trust the flow of life without getting lost in excessive worry. This newfound confidence kept him steadfast in any circumstance. Every small gesture, whether it was giving thanks for the day or dreaming of new projects, now had more meaning. Life seemed richer, more vibrant, as if the colors were brighter than ever. It was prosperity manifesting itself in the form of joy, serenity, and confidence in the future. And it was in this state of expansion that he realized the journey wasn't over yet. There was one final chapter to be written, a conclusion that would demonstrate even more clearly the power of the law of attraction in his life. Looking back today, Michael barely recognizes the man he once was. That insecure young man, lost between debt and unstable jobs, has given way to someone who has learned to create his own reality. His life is living proof that when the mind changes, everything around him begins to fall into place. He realized that the secret wasn't just wishing, but truly believing. It was the consistency in practice, the discipline to maintain faith even when it seemed difficult, that transformed his journey. Michael understood that prosperity is a natural consequence of those who learn to vibrate at the right frequency. More than financial stability, he achieved something much greater: self-confidence. And this confidence opened doors that previously seemed unattainable. He no longer depends on luck, because he knows he carries within himself the power to attract the experiences he desires. His story has become an example for those who still doubt. Michael's journey shows that the law of attraction is not a fairy tale, but a real force, accessible to anyone willing to believe. He is proof that extraordinary changes arise from small habits practiced every day. And by sharing his journey, he leaves a silent question in the air, almost like an invitation. If Michael managed to turn the impossible into reality, what can you also attract into your life? And so, Michael's life became a true testament to the power of the mind. The man who once lived, trapped in debt and uncertainty, now enjoys balance, confidence, and prosperity. He discovered that true wealth lies not only in money, but in the ability to believe in yourself and attract opportunities aligned with your desires. His journey reminds us that every thought is a seed, and that what we choose to cultivate within ourselves blossoms in the world around us. Michael chose gratitude, visualization, and faith, and harvested a new reality, a reality that seemed distant but was always within his reach. And perhaps this is also your chance to reflect. What have you been cultivating in your mind? Fear or trust? Scarcity or abundance? The answer may be silently shaping your tomorrow. If Michael's story touched your heart, remember, prosperity is available to everyone, including you. You just need to believe, practice, and allow the universe to do its part. And before we go, I invite you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep following these inspiring stories that can ignite the flame of transformation within you. The next chapter could be yours.